In August 1975, a typhoon struck central China. What followed wasn't just a natural disaster, it was an engineering catastrophe that the world wouldn't fully understand for decades. Within hours, 62 dams collapsed in a chain reaction. A wall of water 10 kilometers wide and up to 7 meters high swept across the plains at nearly 50 kilometers per hour. Entire towns vanished. Bodies wouldn't be recovered for months. This is the story of the Banqiao Dam, the deadliest dam failure in human history, and a disaster the Chinese government kept classified for nearly 2 decades. The story begins in 1951, just 2 years after the founding of the People's Republic of China. Mao Zedong's government had ambitious plans: modernize the country, control its rivers, and prove that communist engineering could rival or surpass anything the West could build. The Ru River in Henan Province had flooded for centuries. The solution? A massive dam system. Soviet engineers helped design the Banqiao Dam, which would anchor a network of over 100 reservoirs controlling the Huai River basin. Banqiao was completed in 1952, standing 25 meters tall and stretching nearly 120 meters across. It was hailed as an iron dam, unbreakable, a symbol of the new China's power over nature. But almost immediately, problems emerged. Within months of completion, cracks appeared. Water seeped through the structure. By 1955, the dam required major repairs. Engineers reinforced it, raised the height, and expanded its capacity. One engineer saw deeper problems. His name was Chen Xing, and he would become the Cassandra of this story. A man who predicted exactly what would happen and was ignored. Chen argued that the dam system had too few sluice gates. If an extreme flood came, there would be no way to release water fast enough. He recommended 12 sluice gates for Banqiao. The final design included only 5. He was overruled. His concerns were dismissed as overly cautious. During the political turmoil of subsequent years, Chen was removed from the project entirely. The dam that remained was designed to handle about 300 millimeters of rainfall per day. The designers considered this more than sufficient. They were wrong. On August 4, 1975, Typhoon Nina made landfall on China's coast. Normally, typhoons weaken rapidly once they move inland, losing power as they're cut off from warm ocean water. Nina didn't behave normally. The storm collided with a cold front pushing down from the north. Instead of dissipating, Nina stalled directly over Henan Province. For 3 days, it barely moved, and it rained. August 5th, 448 millimeters of rain. August 6th, 672 millimeters in 24 hours. Peak intensity, 189 millimeters in just 1 hour. To put this in perspective, London receives about 600 millimeters of rain in an entire year. Parts of Henan received more than that in a single day. The region experienced what hydrologists call a 1 in 2,000 year rainfall event. Some estimates suggest it may have been a 1 in 10,000 year occurrence. The dam system began to fill, and fill, and fill. By August 7th, the Banqiao Reservoir had risen to dangerous levels. The sluice gates, those 5 gates instead of the 12 Chen Xing had recommended, were opened fully. But years of sedimentation had clogged them. They couldn't discharge water fast enough. Dam operators sent urgent requests to headquarters, permission to use explosives to breach the dam in a controlled way, releasing water before a catastrophic failure. The requests went unanswered. Communication lines had been destroyed by the storm. At 1 a.m. on August 8th, the water reached the top of the dam. At approximately 1 a.m., the unthinkable happened. Banqiao Dam didn't just overflow, it failed completely. The entire structure collapsed. In an instant, 700 million cubic meters of water. Imagine a lake 10 kilometers long, 1 kilometer wide, and 70 meters deep was released. The initial wave was reported to be 10 kilometers wide and 3 to 7 meters high. It moved at 50 kilometers per hour, faster than most people can run. certainly faster than anyone could run in darkness, in a storm, with no warning. But Banqiao was just the beginning. The floodwaters slammed into the next dam downstream, Ximantan, which also collapsed. Then another, and another. Within hours, 62 dams failed in a catastrophic chain reaction. The floods swept across the Henan Plains, an area home to millions of people. Most were asleep. Most had no warning. In some villages, the water arrived so fast that families drowned in their beds. The town of Wencheng, population 9,600, was completely destroyed. Not a single structure remained standing. In Wencheng commune, 827 out of 1,000 residents perished. Survivors later described a sound like thunder, not from the sky, but from the earth. The roar of the approaching water. Then darkness. Then nothing. One survivor recalled clinging to a wooden beam for 9 hours, watching bodies float past. Another described seeing entire houses lifted off their foundations and carried away like toys. By dawn on August 8th, an area of over 12,000 square kilometers was underwater. Some regions wouldn't drain for weeks. The immediate death toll was staggering. Official Chinese government figures released years later acknowledged approximately 26,000 people died in the flooding itself. But that number tells only part of the story. In the weeks and months that followed, disease swept through the region. Contaminated water supplies, decomposing bodies, and millions of displaced people created perfect conditions for epidemics. Dysentery, typhoid, malaria, influenza. Estimates of the total death toll, including those who died from disease and famine in the aftermath, range from 85,000 to 240,000 people. Some researchers place the figure even higher. To put this in perspective, the Banqiao disaster killed more people than any other dam failure in recorded history. By some estimates, more than every other dam failure in history combined. The Chinese military mobilized over 40,000 soldiers for rescue operations. They faced an impossible task. Millions of people stranded, many on rooftops or in trees, spread across thousands of square kilometers. Many waited days for rescue. Some waited longer. Approximately 11 million people were affected. 6 million buildings were destroyed. The economic damage was incalculable. In the West, a disaster of this magnitude would have dominated headlines for months. But in 1975, China was still in the grip of the Cultural Revolution. Information was tightly controlled. The Banqiao Dam failure was classified. For nearly 2 decades, the world knew almost nothing about what had happened. References to the disaster were censored. Survivors were discouraged from speaking publicly. Academic studies were suppressed. It wasn't until 1995, 20 years after the disaster, that Human Rights Watch published a detailed account based on leaked documents. Only then did the international community begin to understand the scale of what had occurred. Today, Banqiao is studied in engineering programs around the world as a cautionary tale. The lessons are clear. Design for the unthinkable. Maintain evacuation and communication systems. Never let political pressure override engineering judgment. Sedimentation and maintenance matter as much as initial design. Chen Xing, the engineer who had warned about insufficient sluice gates, was vindicated, though he took no satisfaction in it. He spent the rest of his career advocating for better dam safety standards in China. China has since become home to more dams than any other country on Earth, including the massive Three Gorges Dam, the largest power station in the world by installed capacity. The lessons of Banqiao have shaped modern dam engineering globally. Today's large dams are designed with multiple redundant safety systems, extensive monitoring equipment, and emergency spillways capable of handling extreme rainfall events. But experts warn that climate change is making 1-in-1,000-year weather events more frequent. The rainfall patterns that engineers planned for in the 20th century may not reflect the realities of the 21st. and thousands of aging dams worldwide, built decades ago, maintained inconsistently, designed for weather patterns that may no longer apply, continue to hold back billions of cubic meters of water above populated areas. The Banqiao Dam was rebuilt and reopened in 1993, a new structure with modern safety features. But for the families who lost everything in August 1975, no engineering improvement can undo what happened. The Ru River flows quietly now through Henan Province. Rice paddies and villages line its banks. Children play near the water. Life has returned. But the river remembers. The land remembers. And the lesson of Banqiao, that nature's power always exceeds our estimates, and that ignoring warnings carries a terrible cost, remains as relevant today as it was 50 years ago. The Banqiao Dam failure remains the deadliest structural failure in human history. If you found this video informative, consider subscribing for more deep dives into history's forgotten disasters. And let me know in the comments, had you heard of the Banqiao Dam failure before today?